everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Tales from the Doghouse Separation Anxiety Explained. I am Stacey Bell, and with me today is...
Hello, I am Ness Jones from Separation Anxiety in Dogs Decoded. We've got an interesting chat today, haven't we, Stacey? So we're going to be talking...
Sure do.
We're going to be talking about if a dog's displaying signs that might look like separation anxiety. You know, we can examine whether it is perhaps, or at least put things into a context that might make more sense. Yeah.
Yes. So sometimes these are called rule outs, but like Ness said, we're just looking at the full picture and trying to determine, is this a separation anxiety thing, or is there another explanation for the behavior that you're seeing?
Yeah. And I've actually got a PDF that you guys can download. I'll put a link into the show notes, whether you're watching it on YouTube or listening to it on your favorite podcast, it will be in the show notes. So you can download it yourself and go through it and do a little checklist to make sure, to see if examine it and make sure it's, if it relates to your dog or not, as the case may be.
Yeah. And if nothing else, it just helps you kind of think through things.
Yeah.
And so you might still need to reach out to a professional to drill down, but it will help you to get you thinking. So let's go through some of those. What do you want to start with?
I don't know. What would you like to start with?
Well, let's talk about, and I think there's kind of a big one, and like some of these are rule outs, as we might call them for short, but then there are also things that can kick off separation anxiety for a dog that has a propensity towards it, right? And so one of those might be if you're in a new environment. So that could be that you moved house, or it could be that you're on holiday and you're trying to leave your dog, or that your dog is being left at your friend's house or a sitter's house or something like that. But it's like a new environment is the baseline there. So if you're in a new environment, and I guess sometimes we take for granted when we've had a dog that has no issues with being left at all and who is really resilient and flexible, we can take for granted in those dogs that are a little less flexible that these things are hard. They don't maybe realize what's going on, of course, because we can't explain that to them. But you might go on holiday and go hiking for the day and then leave your dog there while you go out to dinner. And to us, that seems like it would be no big deal. But for some dogs, that's really difficult.
Yeah. I don't think I would even do that with my own dogs. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so bearing in mind that dogs are creatures of routine, they can change. They can struggle, with changes that are unfamiliar, just being in a new place, and then you walk out the door and leave them. That could be really a big struggle for them. So definitely something to look at the context. As Stacey says, if the dog's fine at home normally and it only happens in your new place, then, it's good data to collate and say, okay, so maybe we need to not leave the dog alone, or maybe we need to, do some training around that in wherever it is, especially if it's a place you visit often. If it's just a place that you go to, once a year or something, maybe it's a bit harder, but to train around it. But if you are there every couple of weeks or something, then it's certainly worth doing something.
We were trying to plan a trip to go visit my son, who's at university, and the one of the Airbnbs that we were looking at, in the description for the amenities, it was talking about that if you wanted to leave your dog, they had a dog sitter on, like, I guess one of the people who lived in the adjacent house could dog sit your dog for you. And I was like, oh, that is so awesome.
That is cool.
Because, yeah, I was just like, I just wanted to give him a shout out, because that's really helpful, because a lot of times you can't take your dog everywhere, even if you can take them most places. So that's good. So we were talking about routine changes, and certainly where you're, living out of is a big routine change if you change that. But also, I think COVID showed us all that those routine changes of, maybe working from home and then having to go back into the office, or maybe not being able to get out of your house as much, or, things like that related to the changes surrounding COVID, but also just in normal life. I know some people have, if you do have kids or you have a job that lines up with the school calendar, there's a lot of times where there's like a big break and that can throw dogs off, or new people in the home. Like when my son comes home from college for the summer, it doesn't, Rowan's really happy with that. But for some dogs, that kind of change can really throw them off.
Yeah. And the whole COVID lockdowns really played a big part. My brain is not joining with my mouth today. So I mean, with the COVID lockdowns, for sure. So, dog gets used to having you home all the time. And they could be fine pre-COVID. That's the really interesting thing. So dogs that never had a struggle before COVID hit, and then COVID hits and the lockdowns hit, then everything goes back to normal, and suddenly the dogs are like, oh, hang on.
Right.
This is really strange. So does that dog have separation anxiety? Is it, I mean, obviously we still want to do some training around that. I'd like to think it's going to be a lot quicker fix than a dog that's always been like that.
Yeah. And that could really depend. I've seen it go both ways, really. But your best bet is to, if you're expecting a big routine change like that, is if you can make it more gradual. I know that's not always possible, but if you can make any routine changes a little bit more gradual and really watch your dog as those routine changes are happening, when you have to leave them, even like if you're making a routine change and your dog is anxious even when you're home, then you really have to move forward gently when leaving them alone. So I would definitely encourage you to reach out for some guidance from a professional on that if you're noticing it.
I think for the guardian that works at home too, I mean, the dog's used to having you around. So what happens when you need to go to the shops or pop out for some reason? I think that in itself can be quite problematic for a dog that's used to coming with you wherever you go, or, just used to hanging out with you at home. So something to keep an eye on, that is for sure. And as you also said, so is there a new person or a pet in the house? That is definitely a routine change, but it's also a new body, a new animal to get used to, and that can be quite hard. So you might get another dog, another cat. There might be somebody moving into your home. There could be somebody leaving your home, and all those things can throw your dog out. Does that mean your dog's got separation anxiety? Not necessarily. So it's just another piece of data that we can look at and say, is my dog normally okay, or has this particular incident, this particular person coming in or leaving or what have you, triggered some sort of separation anxiety? In fact, somebody in my Facebook group posted the other day saying 2 dogs, one of them died, the other dog's really been struggling since that dog died. In fact, I think, and just can't figure out how to navigate the world. So struggling, doesn't be home alone. But does that dog have separation anxiety? It's interesting data.
Well, and these 2 topics that we're talking about, like the new environment and a change in routine, kind of brings to mind rescues. And if you're fostering a dog, or if you've adopted a dog, that dog's whole life and every reference that they've had has changed. So sometimes we'll see a dog really struggling, settling in and being home alone. And, if you're looking at, does the dog have separation anxiety? What I always say is, like, they are in that moment, they are anxious while being home alone. Now, is that a long-term diagnosis? Sometimes we can't tell early on in those stages. So what the best we can do is help that dog feel safe and secure in that moment. And then from there, you're still applying the same training, but like you said, a lot of times it can go a lot more quickly, or we can take chunkier steps than we would normally. But leaving a dog like that to continuously be exposed to those scary absences, even if it was a temporary thing, if they're being exposed to those absences, it could end up exacerbating the problem and making it into a longer term thing. So to me, some of these are like, if we are seeing anxiety in your dog, then we need to take action.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, basically, if we're seeing anxiety and it's over threshold anxiety, think about it. If your dog is going over threshold constantly because it's being triggered by whatever it is, it's likely that it will make things worse. Perhaps the behaviors will accelerate, or there'll be more of them, or they'll start happening quicker. I always liken it. I do a lot of dentist analogies when I'm talking about separation anxiety. I'm not really sure why, but I don't have a major issue with the dentist either. It's not like I've had some horrific, I've had a wisdom tooth out. That wasn't very nice. But, but other than that, yeah, I mean, who likes going to the dentist? So, right? Nobody. So that's the scary event. And for the dog, that might be being home alone after its trigger. And if you think of yourself outside the dentist waiting room, and you're out there, you're waiting to go in, you feel a bit icky, you don't really want to go in, you know it's going to be unpleasant, then you go in, you have your appointment, it's horrible, it's worse than what you thought it was going to be, and then the dentist says, right, I want to see you next week. So
no, thanks.
Next week you're sitting outside the dentist, you're in the dentist waiting room again, and you feel even worse because you had such a bad time the last time. So if you liken that to a dog that's consistently being exposed to over threshold moments, even if it never had it before but something triggered it, then the potential is that it could get worse if it's continually exposed to those scary or dentists. Yeah,
totally.
And another thing that can impact dogs, it could be something that you've got no control over. So are there new neighbors moving in? Is there workmen? Things like that can really
environmental factors.
Yeah.
So even if if your dog is sound sensitive, this is something to pay really close attention to. It could be a combination of things for sure, but it could be down to just the sounds. And then you have different work to do than if it's a combination or just related to separation stuff. But construction for sure, new neighbors coming in, any new sounds, maybe a bus route was reworked and now it goes past your house and your dog is afraid of that. Or even maybe they're not afraid, but they, are barking. And in your head, you're thinking, oh, this must be separation anxiety. Because I do think that there is more awareness of separation related behaviors now. So people are kind of looking for that. And one of the big behavioral indicators of separation related behaviors is vocalization. So, people might be like, oh, barking, okay, they must have separation related behavior. So kind of knowing what is normal for your dog. So for Rowan, if somebody is delivering a package, he will bark. So if I'm not home and somebody delivers a package, he will still bark, but he barks with the same intensity and takes about the same amount of time to settle afterwards. So then I know, okay, that's normal for him. So I'm not worried about that. I don't see any additional signs of anxiety. So that's just him barking at the package guy.
Yeah. So, and that is such a good point. Know what your dog does when you aren't there. So some of my clients will be training and, the dog might be lying down throughout the training, and then it will get up and maybe walk to the window or just move positions maybe. And they, it's easy to become concerned and say, oh my God, it moved, my dog moved. But it's not, it if you think about what dogs do when you're there, say you're at home watching TV or something, bit of Netflix.
Yeah.
Hang on. I think the dogs are going to be silly. Then you'll probably notice if you start being observant that your dog might actually be lying down for a while, then it might get up, shift positions, maybe look out the window. It could do any number of things. So, I see a tail behind you too.
Yes, I see a tail behind you too. Twin tails. That's really true. And I do try to have my clients really look at that, because it can be disconcerting. And like, for instance, with the lip licking or smacking or, whatever, can sometimes be an indicator of anxiety. But almost every time, almost every time Rowan wakes up from a nap, he does that, right? And when I'm home and he's not anxious, right? So then I kind of know, well, that's normal for him to do in that context. So I wouldn't worry about it there. But if I saw it in maybe they were on a walk and a couple off-leash dogs run up to us and he does that, then I know maybe in that context, I'm also seeing his ears are back and his paws lifted. So, in that context, it means he's a little uncomfortable with the situation. So, you can kind of, we're probably going to hit this many times during this episode, is that context is really important. So looking at the full picture.
So important. And the PDF, if you want to click the link in the show notes, it goes through all those things. So if my dog yawns, what might it be? Is it because the dog is tired, or is it because they're stressed, or is it trying to calm itself down? So it's all detailed in the PDF, so you guys can
it's really
actually
great.
Look at your dog. And Stacey cannot stress how valuable it is, I guess, to observe your dog while you were there and what it does in its normal day-to-day life in terms of behavior, body language, all that stuff. Yeah.
So another thing that might impact what we're seeing with a particular dog, and is definitely part of that context picture, is life stages. So for example, with puppies, there are a couple of things to look at there. One, when we look at destructive behavior, which we think of as part of some of the behaviors that you might see if you have a dog with separation anxiety. Well, that's also really normal for puppies to chew on a lot of things that we might think are inappropriate, but the puppy hasn't learned that yet. Another one is potty training, right? So with puppies, a lot of times that potty training isn't complete yet, or they can't hold their bladder for as long as you want to be gone. So if they have an accident, it could be just down to incomplete potty training. It could be, you're just leaving them too long. So there are a lot of things to kind of look at and pick apart there.
Yeah. And then, of course, after puppies, we've got the adolescent dog, which can definitely think of a young teenage dog that's full of energy and doesn't know where to put it. So what might happen, it might be barking, vocalizing. It could be that element of fear of missing out, frustration. It can also destroy your belongings.
Yes, they can. Yes,
that
they
funny
can.
Story. I think I might have mentioned this on the podcast before. So my young girl at the time, the one that was on my lap earlier, she I forget how old she was. She was a teenager, and I hadn't left the house, but I was in the shower. And you can't really do much about anything when you're in the shower. But she'd been out that day, so I thought normally she would just go and settle down till I get out and feed them, etc. But I could hear this yipping. And I'm like, what is that noise? I thought, quick. Something bad's happening. Yes, she had put she'd taken chunks out of my study chair, my office chair.
Right.
And I had a blanket on it for, 2 or 3 years after that. So my husband didn't notice. It wasn't until we moved that he saw it, because the chair came with us. It should have gone in the bin, but it's not this chair. And he's like, what happened to the chair? And I'm like, that happened years ago.
You can't even be mad about it. It happened so long ago.
Yes. So yes, definitely teenage adolescent behavior there. That's for sure. Yeah.
Right. So just making sure, with dogs in all life stages, just making sure their needs are being met. So that's, physical enrichment, which would include exercise, mental enrichment, which might be sniffy games, positive training, trick training. We both really like trick training and sniffy kind of stuff. Some dogs are really social, so getting that some dog play in is good. Making sure they get enough rest is another one.
Yeah, that's a big one. People don't think about that, do they? Yeah.
No. Yeah, and it's really huge. And the more I read and study about rest and sleep and the effect on behavior, the more I really like to check in with clients to make sure that their dogs are getting that. Able to relax and kind of turn off and have some continuous sleep.
Yeah, for sure.
So, So then the another life stage would be seniors. And with seniors, I mean, one of the things is kind of dementia or canine cognitive dysfunction. Sometimes we see behaviors kind of related to that pop up. I don't think it's very common before 8 years old, but it definitely depends on breed and how quickly they mature and their life expectancy and that sort of thing. But if you're seeing changes in the way your dog is behaving and they are older, then that's definitely something to talk to your vet about.
Yeah, I think that check is also important to rule out pain.
Oh gosh, it's so big with
issues because
allergies
allergies can affect their home alone time. So for any dog, but for older dogs in particular, I think.
Right. Yeah, and I think with pain, we do think of that maybe more readily with older dogs, with our seniors. But we need to really add that to one of the things that we ask ourselves when we're looking at dogs in any life stage, because that can really affect behavior. So we do want to look at that.
For sure. So some of the other things other than life stages that might affect your dog's ability to be home alone that may indicate that it has anxiety but doesn't have separation anxiety. So things like, did your dog have a bad day? So there's something called trigger stacking, which we don't need to go into too much, but maybe one little thing happens, another little thing happens, another little thing happens, and then suddenly the dog's just not capable of
dealing with
having a bad day. Like I know for myself, like as a human being, that you could have a series of little events, and then by the end of the day you're just fed up and you're just struggling with life in general, sort of thing. So like for me, if I've had a really busy day,
I just can't make any decisions, right? So my husband will be like, oh, well, which meal are we making tonight? And I'll be like, I just can't decide. Like, that's just too much for me. Like, I have maybe 4 things to decide from, and it's just too much for me. Like, I was like, I have decision fatigue. I can't do it. So, it can show up as anxiety for sure. But like for me, a lot of times it's just like, oh my gosh, I can't even think about one more thing.
Yeah.
So
I get, if I get really scattered like that, I get atrophied. Yeah, exactly what you're saying. Like my decision making, my ability to perform or do something kind of atrophies a little bit, and becomes frozen, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah. So some bad experiences might be a vet visit or groomer visit. It could be, especially if your dog struggles with other behavioral issues like dog reactivity or stranger danger, or even if they don't struggle with those things, but like what I was talking about earlier with off-leash dogs running up to you, I mean, that might be really stressful for some dogs. So that could affect their ability to cope with being home alone.
Or it could be something like they love daycare, but they got bullied, and it could also be something that you are not aware of. They might have just had a bad day for whatever reason.
Well, and it also, I mean, bringing up the point about daycare is a really good one, because even good stress is still stress, right? Like, so even if they love daycare, they might be a little bit overstimulated or have gotten like really like, woo, and just,
How's it
that
go?
still, they still experience that. A lot of the, physiological reactions in your body to good stress and bad stress are the same. And so just realizing that and knowing that, you might need to help your dog kind of come down from that before leaving them.
Yeah. And you touched on sleep. So what people may not know is that dogs can, depending on the dog, the breed, the genetics, what have you, up to 17 hours a day, isn't it? It's incredible. I had no idea.
Amount of time. Crazy amount of time. Yeah. Yeah.
I knew horses did, but the dog thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's not necessarily always sleep either. Sometimes it can be just resting, but they spend a lot of time doing that stuff. So yeah, it's important to kind of know what's normal. And then, if you're seeing something wildly different and your dog is having behavioral struggles, to try to address that.
Yeah. And of course, exercise and enrichment, which you've already touched on. Age appropriate, of course. And
we do have, I think, several podcasts about enrichment. So if you're not sure what we mean by that, go back and listen to those, because we've had some super guests on the show. Yeah. One of the ones I think we haven't hit yet is confinement phobia or containment phobia, or it's called a lot of different things, but
claustrophobia.
Claustrophobia, right?
That's what I get.
It's more about being confined in than the actual separation from you. So sometimes it's a combination, right? Sometimes the dog has separation anxiety, but also has confinement phobia. And in those dogs, we see that the separations are harder when they're confined in a crate or a smaller area. And sometimes just getting the dog out of the crate, I've worked with several clients where that was the case, just get them out. And sometimes it's 100% cured. And to me, those are the lucky ones, because then you don't have to work through anything else. Yeah. I mean, some people really still want to work on crate training. And you can do that, but just like you can leave your dog out of the crate too. And so that gives them a little bit of flexibility while they're working through that.
Just but sorry, go on, you go.
Some dogs, it's the crate, but they're okay baby gated into the kitchen. And some dogs, if they don't have full run of the house, then they're not okay. So you do have to kind of know your dog, because in essence, your whole house is a confinement area, right? Like when you leave, if your dog is in the house, they are confined. So a little bit, it's, what is the point at which your dog says, no, this is too small, but this is okay.
And we do have
that can be different.
We do have episodes on crates as well, so check them out.
Yes, we do.
The other thing I'd like to add just to that is dogs. Some dogs that are outside and panic, just by changing the parameters, bringing them inside, the training go wonderfully. So I've had a couple of clients like that where dog has been outside, total panic, just awful stuff, tried to get out of the yard, hurt themselves, cut themselves up, etc. Brought the dog in to do the training, still needs training, obviously, but that just changing that for the dog actually has made a huge difference. Yeah. So that's to keep in mind as well. So, I mean, I think for any of these things, training is really good. Even if your dog doesn't have separation anxiety, maybe it's the displaying behaviors that are related to frustration or fear of missing out, the training is still good. So it's still better to do the training than just leave your dog to potentially have an over threshold moment. So if it was based in frustration or what have you, or even, somebody outside, new workmen, something like that. By doing the training, you're making sure the dog's never going to go over the threshold. So we do. I think you touched on it earlier, Stacey, that even a dog that doesn't have separation anxiety, it can tip over if you're not cautious about it. So
right, yeah, and I think that's particularly important for when we see a dog that has a big life change, and I see it a lot with rescues, where the rescue might have told them, oh, just wait a month and see if they settle in. I'm like, yeah, but in that month they're having repeated negative exposures unless you're also managing absences there. So I always encourage people to get help early, and that usually leads to an easier resolution.
Being proactive, I think, is important. And if you are adopting a rescue, and let's not forget that rescues, you might not be their second home, or you could be their first home. We don't know if they're like a street dog or something like that. But you could be their third, fourth, even fifth home. So that dog's already coming with potential abandonment issues. You can understand that they might be scared of being by themselves. So be proactive, get the training done properly from the get-go. Don't wait till it's a problem.
And a lot of rescues, not a lot, some portion, not sure of the portion, but some that I have fostered even had lived solely outside. So being inside is scary. The noises, the fans, everything is scary, partially the containment, I'm sure. So that's another thing. Like if your dog is not feeling safe and secure in that environment, then being left alone in that environment is going to be even harder. So that's something to kind of consider. So do you have any kind of contexty things left? I think we hit all of the ones. I did want to kind of look at things through the flip side. So looking at, for instance, destructive behavior. If you're seeing destructive behavior in your dog, what else could it be? Right. So we definitely have talked about frustration, boredom, those types of things leading to destruction, but also just normal puppy inquisitiveness.
And teething.
Yes. Another one can be nesting. So if your dog is pregnant or has a phantom pregnancy, a lot of times they'll do nesting behaviors, and that can include some destruction. But it can also be play, right? Like we had adopted a 1.5-year-old mixed breed, and he was so exuberant. I mean, he was so happy. So you could tell it wasn't from anxiety, but he would just like when my best friend would come over to the house, he loved her, and he would run and get a pillow, like a throw pillow from my bed, and then like run around the house with it and like shake it. And like, so that has, it's just a excitement thing, kind of a play thing. So all destruction is not necessarily, it definitely could be also due solely to like a noise phobia. So a lot of times dogs will, like one of my dogs would go into the corner of my closet and dig into the carpet, and that would pull it up. So that kind of destruction could also be just down to noise phobia. So there's a lot of things, I think, for destructiveness, like if you're not seeing other things that might point to separation anxiety, that could be just down to, it could be multiple issues.
Yeah. And noise phobia is a big one. So
it really is.
When we first moved here, Mr. Big, who is fine to be left by himself, but has got noise phobia. I always try not to leave him on garbage day, for example. But when we first moved in, he was very, very unsettled just because of all the new noises in the environment, kids up the back. I think it was school holidays as well. So that was a bit problematic for him. The kids are around a lot more. Not that they do anything bad. They don't scream or shout, but, balls being bounced and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't used to the noise. He's fine now. But the times I did pop out and come home, he'd been on the bed and obviously panting. His kind of anxiety tells, big ones are trembling, panting, and dribbling. The drool, the bean was absolutely soaked. So, you could look at that and say, well, that dog's got separation anxiety. You went out and that happened, but actually it was because he heard something, he was scared. It's the context is important. If you understand your dog, what it's like when you're there, what its normal is, I think, and then what's going on in its life, that's really, really important. Before we jump to conclusions, because the phrase separation anxiety did become a big buzzword after the COVID lockdowns. Understandably. I'm just, and it's good in the sense that maybe people that didn't realize that their dog had separation anxiety have found out. So maybe they've gone, oh, maybe I should film my dog while I'm out and see what's actually.
Yes, which we're huge proponents of.
Yes.
Watching your dog.
Absolutely. Your dog. Yeah.
But so just thinking, go ahead.
Oh, no. But again, if we can look at the context, maybe it's not separation anxiety. And I think it's really important not to jump to conclusions and start panicking. Like, let's get some data and find out first.
Right. So just because you mentioned kind of that drooling or hypersalivation, so that can be due to other things too. That can be due to toxin, like if they ingested something that's
have I told you about Bertha and the cane toad? Have I told you that story?
You told me that, but I don't think we've talked about it on the show.
Oh, do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, go for it.
This is not to do with anxiety or separation anxiety. It does have a lot to do with drooling, though. So we've got cane toads here in Queensland, Australia, and they're very poisonous. And obviously they bounce around in the back lawn at night only. The dogs are they know not to go near them. But when she was younger, not that much younger, but she was in her non-thinking, she was just excited. I'd let her out the back door for her bedtime wheeze, and she's like, yeah. And the movement triggered her. It's the hard part, the prey kind of thing. And so she ended up licking it, and you're supposed to get a hose in the back of their mouth and wash it out, wash the poison out. Obviously you don't want to you don't want them to ingest it, so you got to be careful. Right. Hose. But being a Malinois and being a bit of a wriggler, and she was not having any of that, hose or no hose. So anyway, later on, she basically had the effects, and she was drooling, and it was she was not well. She was basically having a trip, I guess. Yeah. But she recovered. It only didn't last long. I would have taken her to the vets, but I knew that it was, the timing was kind of, I monitored her first, let's put it that way, before I rushed her to the vets.
Yeah. So
it was horrific, though. It was not nice.
Yeah, I bet it was really scary.
Yeah.
I would have, that. We do have some poisonous toads here as well. And I was always told you're supposed to take like a really wet wash rag cloth and like put it in their mouth and like wipe it out. But so the same kind of thing is just try to get rid of as much of it as you can. But that's never happened to me. It did happen to my best friend's dog, Lula. And she was able to, get most of it out to where the effects were really, it always happens at night. You know what I mean? When the vet offices aren't open. So it's a tough one. Okay. So with hypersalivation, a toxin, whether it's a toad or some other thing, gastrointestinal distress. So even like, motion sickness can be another one, but that wouldn't really happen unless you're Sarah's dog on a boat.
Yeah. Or in a car.
Yeah. But then the separation, I guess but you probably wouldn't.
Oh, I see.
But anyways,
I got you.
But it could be kidney or dental disease as well. So those are things to, like when we say get your dog checked by the vet, if you're seeing a big change in behavior, these are some of the reasons for that. Even like inappropriate inappropriate urination, yes, it could totally be that your dog is super anxious, but it could also be that they have a urinary tract infection, that they've had a seizure when you're gone, or that incomplete potty training or cognitive dysfunction.
Some dogs get incontinence after spaying. I had a ruddy bitch that had that. So she was house trained. It was really upsetting. She'd get really embarrassed because she was taken by surprise when it happened as well. It was right. I mean, we managed it. But it was mainly after if she over-exercised or if she'd been swimming for ages. But I mean, it can happen, and it can affect dogs in different ways. So that could be another reason. So again, a vet visit is appropriate. To diagnose it.
Yeah. So anyways, it's always good to get that vet visit. And if your vet is, open to you bringing some documentation. Open to bringing some documentation in the, I'm trying to get the name of the study. I'm going to slaughter it. The review of epidemiological, pathological, genetic, and epigenetic factors that may contribute to the development of separation anxiety in dogs. They have a chart, and the chart has a bunch of medical factors that may impact, that may present as separation related behaviors, and some behavioral things as well. We can link to the study.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes.
The notes.
Perfect.
But that one's a really good one. Just a good read. The whole study is a review. It's a review of studies, really. Really a good one to read. But also that chart's super helpful if you do have a vet that is open to kind of you bring something in and saying, hey, can we just quickly kind of look at this and see if any of these things are a factor in my particular dog.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah. Cool.
So I think that's all I have as far as rule outs, but I don't think we can stress enough to video and to look at the full context. I think both of those things are super important when trying to determine if your dog is struggling specifically because you're away, if that's the source of their anxiety or behavior.
Yeah, for sure. And look, the you can download the PDF. It'll be in the show notes, and just go through it and say, oh, okay, so it gives you all those context things that you can look at, but it will also give you some signals like body language signs, some of those subtle signs that can make you, maybe jump to the conclusion of separation anxiety or just anxiety in general. But maybe, again, the context is so important. Maybe it could be something else. So, it goes through all that. It goes through understanding your dog's body language and what it looks like when you are there, when your dog is relaxed or playful or happy. So you can identify what it looks like when it's not.
Yes.
Pretty important.
So your assignments are
your assignment, your homework.
Your homework after listening or watching this episode are to check out the links in the show notes, engage with those to give you kind of a better idea of helping troubleshoot. Does your dog have separation related behaviors, or is something else going on, or both? It could always be both. That's the wrench in it. But interact with those, have a look, reflect on your own dog. If you're not sure, if you're just seeing the evidence of stuff when you get home, like maybe some destruction or urination or defecation or whatever, make sure you're videoing your dog, because that will give you kind of a better idea, because you'll be able to see the context a little better, what your dog's body language is doing. Video.
And preferably with a live feed.
Reach out sooner than later if you're not sure.
Be proactive is best.
Yes.
Yeah. It's always best to be proactive.
Yeah.
Because if you're reactive, your dog's already rehearsed things that you don't want. So cool. And don't forget, so if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. And don't forget that if you don't want to watch us, you can always listen to us I'm sure you've got it on your website.
Most listening platforms have us. So yeah, just search for Tales from the Doghouse and we'll be there.
It's also on my website, nessjones.com. Is it on your website?
It is on my website, focusfun.net.
On our websites, yeah.
Yep.
And those links are below the video as well, or the show notes.
Yes, show notes. All right.
Alrighty.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you. See you next time. Oh, Stacey, we have an exciting episode next time.
Yes, we do.
We've got a special guest, a former client of mine that's been through my program, and she's going to tell us what we did, what she was going through before, during, and after. It's going to be a really good episode.
Fabulous. Yeah, it's always good for people to hear about other people's journeys, I think.
Absolutely. Cool.
Fabulous. All righty, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.